Welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me here today as we get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, comic books. My name is Jose. I love comic books. I love talking about them. I love sharing them with you. Follow me on social media. Links in the description below. I love to post my art. That's about all I do. We're going to be covering today Iron Man 199 and 200 from 1985. Now, I have covered a couple of issues from Denny O'Neil's run. Part of the whole thing is the deconstruction and reconstruction of Tony Stark. And also, issue 200 is going to mark the first appearance of the Silver Centurion armor that was pretty cool during those mid 80s, the red and white armor. Now, I haven't covered every single issue that is been part of Denny O'Neil's run. I've covered a couple of issues, but what basically I am posting a link to the Marvel database fan site, the wiki site, that you can kind of look at everything that's kind of going on. This is part of the Ironmonger storyline from 193 to 200. So basically, Obadiah Stane took over Stark International, and this is Tony Stark fighting back. Tony Stark reverted back to his alcoholism, and Rhodey has been Iron Man throughout most of this run. So Rhodey has been inside the Iron Man, but Tony Stark will return as the Iron Man. He's been sort of in an old armor, fighting alongside Rhodey, kind of as a sidekick, but he will return then to being the full-time. Bob Layton provides this cover for 199. Pretty cool here. Bob Layton does not do the art on the inside, but he did do the cover. So on the links below, like I said, links to the Marvel Wiki site, and you can kind of go back and take a look as to sort of what happened before. It kind of gives you like a plot synopsis and stuff, but here we go. So we start out with the credits here. Denny O'Neil is the writer. Herb Trimpe, who many people will know from as the co-creator of Wolverine, is the penciler, and Jim Shooter is still at Marvel as editor-in-chief, and then Mark Grenwald is your editor, who is also one of the longest-running Captain America writers. So he wrote a lot of Captain America during the 80s and 90s. So here we start out with Mrs. Arbogast, being kidnapped by these people, all kind of looking here, and they basically threaten the populace, saying, hey, if any of you move, we're gonna, you guys are gonna be dead. And then they're needing the helicopter here. So she used to be Tony Stark's assistant, but not anymore, since Stark International basically was taken over by Obadiah Stane. So but she used to work for Tony. Now, they started a small company called Circuits Maximus. So it's been Tony Stark and Clymenstra Irwin and her brother Morley. Okay, so Bethany Cabe has been missing, and she's actually under the control, like a mind control, of Obadiah Stane. So that's been happening before. Like I said, I haven't covered that, so we're just gonna kind of fill in the gaps as we go along. So they're wondering where she is. So Clymestra thinks, she doesn't like Bethany Cabe, but Tony does. And so he's gonna start looking for her and maybe start where she was kidnapped. During this time, Tony just refuses to be Iron Man. He just does not care. Rhodey says, well, take the armor, and Tony Stark basically says no. He refuses to do it again. And then here's Irwin here. I'm sorry, I said Irwin is his last name. Morley is his first name, and then because they're both Irwins, so and this here is Cly. Oh my gosh, I that name Clymenstra. That sounds so 50ish. So Morley comes with a reporter here named Susan Mulray, and she's from this I don't know the name of this newspaper, the Tulaluma Tribune. And so she's basically doing a story on small companies like theirs. And so Morley wants to basically for interviews here, and they all kind of say how much knowledge he has and all that stuff here. So Tony Stark is still thinking about Bethany, and then of course Clymenstra here says, "Oh my gosh, my brother's smitten." So he's got the crush on the reporter apparently. So now they're at the Tyluluma. I don't know. They're at the newspaper here. This is the 80s before everything could be done, the way things are done now. So in the 80s, you actually had to go and do the interviews in person. So she's gonna show him around because he was nice enough to show them around, and then so they're getting some news from the AP, and this device is going on all the way, and he says, "Oh, that's from New York. Let me read it." And then he sees it and wants a phone so that he can call Tony Stark. He tells him that Mrs. Arbogast has been kidnapped, and Cly says, "Oh my gosh, just like Bethany Cabe." So they deduce that someone is grabbing all of Tony Stark's friends. That includes them. So Jim's gonna put on the armor. He has been Iron Man for quite a bit. So as Iron Man, Jim is gonna go visit Vic Martinelli here, who used to work for Tony, although now he does work as Stane's internet security chief. So Iron Man goes visit him, and he says thanks for the warning, but he thinks he's pretty safe. He's making a TV dinner here. So kind of gives you an idea that he lives alone here. Jim basically asks if there's anything he would like to tell him. He says he's pretty loyal. Stane pays his salary, but does tell him to be very careful. Stane plays rough, real rough, he says. So then I believe I think they're in the California over here. So I believe now this would be like around New York. And so you can see Stark International is now Stane International here. And someone here is saying, here she is, Mr. Stane, which of course is Mrs. Arbogast, who was kidnapped. Mrs. A says, "Oh my gosh, they got you too, Miss Cabe." Of course, Cabe here. Gosh, what's her first name? Bethany. So Bethany Cabe here is, of course, under his control. So she says, "Oh, I want to be gotten," which of course she doesn't, but she's under his control. And Mrs. A is like, "How can you stand being near the slimy?" And of course he is angry at that, so he says, "Silence her." Then Bethany, who is, like I said, under his control mentally or whatever, they brainwashed her. She tells him, "Oh, you shouldn't lose your cool," and asks, "Why are you trying to get all of Tony's people?" And he says he failed to take him completely down the first time, but he won't fail again, and then tells his people to begin the next phase. And of course, they're like, "Yep, ready to do immediately." So now we are in a Cleveland airport, and this flight is arriving from San Francisco. So Jim Rhodes is in Cleveland here. He can't find a cab. Of course, he's carrying the suitcase 'cause that's where the armor is. So he's gonna go in here to go change. He's looking for Pepper and Happy, who I believe are together during this time, despite the movies with Pepper being with Tony Schiess. She was with Happy during this time. So he's gonna go in here, and of course they see him. Hey, fella, you can't go in there. And he turns into Iron Man and leaves. So he's heading to see if he can find them. And he notices this helicopter from Stain International. So he sees that they have Pepper, who's also a redhead. There's so many redheads in comic books. Man, there are so many redheads. I've always said that in comic books, the amount of redheads probably exceeds what it is in real life. So, Lex Luthor, I believe, is a redhead as well in the comic book. So they see Iron Man and they start shooting him with their laser guns. And here's Pepper and Pepper Hogan, and then formerly Pepper Potts, and she tells him to look out, and he's hit from that airport from behind. Nice panel here, big panel. Pepper asks if he's okay. He's like, I can't seem to get the circuits working or functioning. They're gonna kidnap her before he can recover, and she asks for help. He finally gets his bearings. He's about to go after them, but notices that when they shot him, it reflected and hit that building. So he needs to rescue those people before he goes after Pepper. And so here he goes, kind of rescuing and making sure everybody's okay. They all thank him, and sees these two kids crying, mom. So they're Pepper's kids. So he grabs one of the people there that was left over. So he threatens her, says, "Tell me where they're going, or I'm gonna punch his head off." Which, of course, she says she's heading for the husband, and so tells the kids, "Hey, take care. I'll go get him." So he radios the police to let them know about the kids, and he's gonna go to find Happy, who's reading the paper here, drinking his coffee. And he's suddenly attacked, and they're kidnapping him. Man, oh man, nothing like supervillains kidnapping people. Everything's so over the top. I love it. So Iron Man has shown up. They're attacking him again. They think they got him, but of course they didn't. And so he goes in there to try and disable the helicopter, and they shoot him, but doesn't work. He uses his reflector beams, and this guy here says, "Hey, don't move or we'll blast him." But at that time, the helicopter takes a nosedive. Iron Man, of course, has his magnetic boots. He grabs Happy, and he says, "What about the kidnappers?" And he says, "We'll check on them later." Are most likely dead, but hey, that's all right. And we always keep it. The '80s were very PG. '80s and '90s were very PG for comic books. So Tony's returned now to New York. And of course, this is where he was a raging alcoholic. So he is a little nervous about going back. But of course, he sees Stain's man's and they have a baby. So Tony runs and says, "Hey, I'll take the kid." And they're like, you'll take this." And they hit him. I don't think they recognize him as Tony because otherwise that would have been the point. Tony kind of comes around and here's a nun here. He asks if that was the Anders baby, and they says yes, and they asked if he knows the child. And I did cover this issue. This is the child that was born to Tony's love interest at that time. It's a very touching, great issue. So if you go to the playlist, no, I mean not the playlist. If you just search on the videos that I've posted, search for Iron Man 180 and 182, and it's covered in the 182 issue. He basically says that he knew the child was going to get kidnapped because they're trying to get to him through everyone that he cares about. Of course, he gets the through the wire. The reporter tells Irwin here that Tony was beaten up, but his injuries were minor, and that the baby was kidnapped. So Morley, I said Irwin, I'm sorry, Morley is deducing, or the reporter's deducing that stuff's happening to those close to Stark, so she's going to stay real close to him, which Morley, of course, says yes. So at State International in New York, his people say that they have the cops have 4 of their operatives, but they got the woman and the kid, but were not able to get the husband. So they have, obviously the husband's happy, so they got Pepper here, and Stain's gonna find a way to deal with Iron Man. So there's a delivery for a package, and he thinks that it's an oscillator that Clive's been waiting for, and that she'll be happy when she arrives because they've been waiting for that thing, and that they should be back from the airport soon with Tony. And so at LAX here, they've arrived from New York. They have a bit of a conversation here. Tony basically regrets making friends because now everybody is in danger because of him. She asks, why do you think Stain's doing this? But of course, mad people do that like that. So, and they're getting there, and of course, when they get there, the building explodes, and explodes badly. Very simple how they drew the explosion, but it conveys the message. A lot of the problem during this time is that there were not that many superstar artists, or at least the style. Jim Lee still had not. Jim Lee was, I believe, I don't think he started till a couple of years later in or maybe he was already in Alpha Flight. But the style that you're familiar with now just had not occurred then. So they're still drawing in a very simple way during this time, but it's effective. So the building blew up. Tony is just feeling really bad about everything, and sees this. The ambulance is coming here. They're taking a body out, and he needs to see who's in there. And they're like, no, you don't have to. That there's not much left, and he is going to look in there. And of course, we don't reveal it yet, but um, it'll be continued in Iron Man 200, which we are going to cover immediately right now. I'm trying to just um, get these issues. I'm trying to do two at a time. So, of course, we now have Iron Man 200, which is the Silver Centurion. And we got this great cover um, here as Iron Man and the Ironmonger are going to battle. Now, one of the neat things is this beginning in this issue, Mark Bright takes over as penciling, and he will remain penciler for a couple years. So Bob Layton and David Michelini will return eventually, and Bob Layton will be the inker, but Mark Bright will be the penciler, which includes the Stark Wars, and I will be covering those. Eventually, I'll be get to it. So we got our title here. Doctor says that his friend is dead, and of course, Tony says he knows. And of course, here we have our credits. Denny O'Neil, rest in peace, is the writer again. His run is actually very underrated, and if you would have had a superstar or a decent penciler throughout his, someone famous, someone people care about, Luke McDonald, I thought was very efficient for the most part. He was the penciler mostly during that run. I think if he would have had someone a little bit more famous or a little bit more, I don't know, this would have been, it's a great run to read. I mean, my goodness, it's really good to read, but it just doesn't have that oomph. But Mark Bright does provide that oomph. So toward the end, this really works out great. So at this moment, they're kind of lingering here. They're not revealing who died. It could be, of course, Rhodey, but we know it's not Rhodey. So, but we still don't know who actually has died. So, we kind of get a little bit of a recap, because that is how I think this is a spectacular way that comics should do. Jim Shooter had a mandate that says every comics is somebody's first, and I love how they recap so that if you get a new reader, you're not completely, because 200 is a good jumping on point. So if somebody say, oh, 200, I'll take it. So we now can see that Rhodey's here. So we know Rhodey's not the person that died. He, of course, was in the back outside. So he knows that he would have died if he would have been in there. He asks about Clymestra, and the doctors were working on her, Tony says, but now they're finished. And he says, are you okay? And she says, no, don't touch me, don't come near me. And she asks, why are you, Rhodey says, why are you mad at him? And of course, she says here, if it wasn't for Tony, look, her glasses are broken. If it wasn't for him being Tony, her brother would be alive. So we know that the person in there was I wanted to call him Irwin again. Goodness gracious. And Morley. She says it was basically his not being Iron Man and going to stop Stain that got her brother killed. So she blames him for not wanting to be Iron Man. Rhodey, of course, says we aren't sure Stain's behind him, and she's like, "Don't be a fool." And Tony's right. It was Stain. Tony, of course, did not want to be Iron Man because he is afraid of what would happen if he got back in there. The drinking and all that. He realizes he's been a fool for not accepting that he is Iron Man. and a coward. So Tony, of course, admits he could have stopped this, and now it's time to put an end to it. And he says, "All right, I got the armor right here," and he says, "Keep it." And he says, "But with this busted leg, because he's broken, he won't be able to wear it." He says he appreciates his concern, but he can do this alone. And they ask him where he's going. He says to Los Angeles, and Rhodey, of course, says, "I haven't seen him this intense," and he almost feels sorry for Stain. Of course, she says she doesn't. And so, of course, most likely it's Bethany asking how come he didn't kill Tony. Basically, Obadiah saying, he wants to toy with him. He wants him to know that he beat him, humiliated him, all the stuff, all the typical supervillain maniacal things that they all do and say. And Madame Matt, he's got quite a collection of his people, but he basically wants him to be. He doesn't want to kill him. He wants him basically to go and be a drunk again. And then, so he asks if he resents what he's done to her. She says, "No, I adore you." And of course, he says, "Like you adored Stark," and she says, "Yes." But we can't tell, because when you see this with her kind of looking at the camera, you don't know whether or not this is being serious or not. So now he's at the West Coast Avengers mansion. Hawkeye says, "Oh, it's good to see you. You notice how everybody's always in costume?" And Tony's in a mission. He says, "Get away," and he's going to go in there. And of course, you can see him creating the new armor. And he goes and puts it on. Such a back then, to put on the armor like a little piece at a time. Of course, now it's that new one that it just kind of appears from the extremis, I believe. So it's a lot easier than this. But hey, we're limited by the technology of the time, so they probably didn't think of the nanotechnology and all that good stuff. So he's, of course, now putting on and then we, of course, get the big reveal. I'll show this one again, but this is, of course, the first appearance of the Silver Centurion armor. Pretty cool. It is pretty clunky, but it's pretty cool. I have this issue. I have both. I have all this run here, but I also have a couple of the action figures. They're pretty cool. So this armor is pretty cool. It's pretty dear and near to my heart. So after finishing it, Tony's gonna go. He doesn't even talk to so he's on a mission. He doesn't even talk to them, and he goes to test his armor. So real quick here, I love the zipatone here, but I love these vertical panels kind of all connecting. So from here to here and then back. So pretty cool. And he's just testing all the kind of systems. I love this one. It just kind of here Iron Man becomes sort of cool again. The story has been really good, but the art is now finally matching the story. Whereas before, again, no offense to the people that were working on it prior to it, they were cartoonist kayfabe calls them jobbers. I don't know if that term really isn't. They did the best they could, but they weren't Luke McDonnell and Herb Trimpe and they just don't move the needle. So you gotta have spectacular art to go along with superb writing, and the writing was superb, but the art just didn't quite hit. But Mark Bright really started to hit on all cylinders from the get-go. So Um, Here, Stain is taking Bethany Cabe down. He says he's got another surprise, and she's like, "I'm not certain I can stand another surprise." So something's up because again, it's just kind of how they've been drawing her, and of course, this is Doctor Atlanta, very cool, and he's refining a psyche imprint process, um, and he of course had experimented it on himself, but something went wrong, and he found him at an insane asylum, and so, which is of course what they tried and did with her. She's kind of figuring out. It almost seems like she's coming out of it, but anyway, so now he's gonna show her the surprise, which is of course Project Ironmonger. So, which is what we're going to be seeing in that awesome armor in the cover. Again, I love the big zipatones that they're using and the different kind of. I really like it when the inkers add those zipatones. So, of course, he's using, because he bought Stark, he's using all the proprietary stuff, and he left the plans for building an Iron Man, and that's essentially what Stain is doing, and he's creating his own Iron Man, the Ironmonger. So, very cool here. This is supposed to be the pinnacle of technology, and thinks it'll destroy Iron Man. But of course, he doesn't know Tony created a new Iron Man armor at the moment. So, using most current technology. So, he's been working to create duplicates and build an army to take over the world. So, ultimately, he wants to basically, like most supervillains, he wants to take over the world. So at a lookout tower here, they're saying the radar shows something overhead, and then it was gone, and then they see it up there, and of course it's Iron Man, but he uses like a cloak, so he has disappeared, and then they think they're just seeing things. So he flies through and uses his sensors to detect where they would be. Dr. Atlanta's about to start on Pepper Potts, but Stain says that he told him there would be no more experiments until he ordered it. And then Bethany's like, "You'll get a chance." And Stain thinks he's already had his chance, and he's done something very interesting to them. Um, so Tony's gonna go in there and just bust through the open, and demands to see Obadiah Stane. Tells him that he's there. She says, "Do you have an appointment?" And he's like, "Yep, I've had an appointment for years." So, she'll go get him. Um, Love the zipatones right here. I like zipatones. So, they tell him, and he's like, realizes he's got a new armor and knows inside it's Tony Stark, demanding a confrontation, so he's not broken. So it kind of um, throws him off for a bit. I know this video is a little bit longer than most videos that I do, but in the 80s they really packed a lot of story into these issues, and 200 is a double-sized issue, so it's almost like I'm doing 3 issues here. So I do try not to make my videos too long, but couldn't help it with this one. So Obadiah is going to send this chopper to get rid of him, and he senses that they're going to throw some missiles at him, so he gets out of there because he doesn't want them to hit the building with the people inside. and he quickly dispatches of the missiles and then the helicopter. And so Stain now sends the chessmen, who we did not cover. I think we only one of the issues that I covered had one of them, but um, it kind of gives you backstory here of um, when he first became, that he had fought them in the past, and so these are the issues of Iron Man. If you have any questions, 163 to 166, I didn't cover them, but in the wiki database down there, you can go take a look and see what kind of happened if you have any questions about it. But he then quickly also dispatches of those chessmen. This new armor is very powerful. So Stain realizes no one is able to get rid of him, then he'll have to do it. So of course he's walking toward where the Ironmonger armor is and decides he's going to put it on himself. So now, if you remember in the cover, it was so huge, but really it's the size of him. So I love it in the first movie. Obadiah Stane is played by Jeff Bridges, and that was his business partner as opposed to his longtime rival. But I love that armor, that huge armor. But and it probably is, but when you see him putting it on, uh, it's about the same size. So, but love the Zipatones again. Mark Bright, like I said, he remains the penciler for a while, and eventually Bob Layton and David Michelini do return. So we are now going to see Mr. Stain with the Ironmonger take on. So the armor hasn't been tested, but he's gonna go out anyway. So it's time for the fight. And loves the Zipatone here. We got a gradual one. Man, oh man, I love Zipatone. I love it when artists use it. So we got our fight now coming up. This has been building up since issue 160. Like I said, I didn't cover everything. So, well worth it. If you get the epic, I think 2 volumes of the epic Iron Man do cover this entire story by Dennis O'Neil. Well worth reading. It is good, and like I said, the art is it does its job. It doesn't necessarily wow you with like Layton does and some of these other artists do, but it's serviceable. So, well, I recommend it. It's well worth purchasing. The issues are not very expensive. I like this panel. This looks very Simonson-ish. So all the people, he's just destroying everything, trying to get, and he's trying to stop him so he doesn't hurt all those people that are underneath it. So he realizes how strong that armor is. So. And here you have this huge explosion here. Mark Bright is a very good penciler. So, like I said, the end of his run, because of Mark Bright, is much, much better. Because I think Mark Bright is a very serviceable penciler. And when Bob Layton returns, man, oh man, it really pops off. But Dennis O'Neil does leave. So when he does return, so he basically arrives here, and Stain says if you move, there's your friends are gonna all die from electricity. He's willing to kill all of them. He says he has to stay still. So Obadiah tells Tony that they're being fed and watered by intravenous injections. So, and will sustain them for months. So he says he has two choices. He can either move and then they'll all die, or he can stay still, remain motionless, and basically starve to death. And he knows him, and he says that he knows he'll choose that. Um, Tony asks why him, and he says that he needed a worthy opponent, and no game is worth playing without formidable opposition. And gives him a toast and says, "To your health." And love the Zipatones here. A couple of different ones. Just looks beautiful. Um, Man, oh man. I wish Zipatones were used more. I know that they're done digitally now, and on my iPad, I work digitally also. I have Zipatones, but I just noticed a lot of people don't use them quite as much. So, I think they're cool. So he's going to scan the room and sees that um, he gives it a shot using his chest plate and aims for the circuit. And so that won't be able to electrocute them anymore. So he releases everyone. So they all, of course, um, look at the new armor, but realize that he is Iron Man again. More of the Zipatone. So cool. So cool. So he tells him to stay put, and he'll be back shortly. So he's got to go where Stain was, but of course, Stain is no longer there. So, and he's going to find him, and now he's holding the baby, which shows you what a true villain he is. So he says he won't stay, that he finds alternatives, and if alternate tactics, and if one doesn't work, he just goes on and on and on, changing tactics until it works. And now he's going to use that baby as his final tactic, and he won't fail. Again, the Zipatone's in the middle. Oh, I love it. In my Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest, I have a couple of illustrations that I did of the of his armor using Zipatones, because I just think that they're so cool, particularly on Iron Man. He tells him to take off his helmet, or he'll basically crush the baby. And so Tony is not gonna play his games, and he uses his armor to blow up the building underneath it, because there was no people; it was unoccupied. So it causes a shockwave, and he drops the baby. So now he goes and catches it, and so he fights him with the baby and gives the baby to the firefighters here, and he is going to um, fight Stain once and for all. So Iron Man thinks he's defeated him, but he says not quite. So he concedes that Tony won and that bested him, but he can deprive him. And of course, he tells him about his father and what his father had done. And he is. This is probably the coolest thing. He says he's just going to deprive him of bringing him to justice. And Tony tries to stop him, but it does not. This is a. I don't know. It's a. It's not the ending, perhaps, that people would want, because the suicide does seem, he doesn't, the villain kind of sort of gets away with it, but doesn't, but I think it fits well. So Tony walks away, and they go, "What happened?" And he says, "Somebody lost." And of course, we reach the end of the issue finally. So, um, like I said, this video was longer than most, but it is like covering 3 issues. Probably more. There's a lot of story that's packed into these, as you can see. So, Iron Man 199 and 200 from 1985. I hope you enjoyed it. It is a good stuff. So if I do recommend you getting these, and you can get these on the Epic Collection. You go get Denny O'Neil's run on Iron Man, which is underrated. So like and subscribe. Thanks for listening.